Tilea's Troubles, Part 80. The Hunter Hunted. North of Viadaza, Autumn 2403. 2 weeks out from the city of Viadaza, the army of the Disciplinati di Morr ground to a halt. The Prepositus Generalis, Father Caradalio, had decided enough was enough. Every night more men had died, despite the army's precautions, the guards and watchers set, the prayers spoken, hymns sung, and devotions chanted. Every day they would march on, tired from their sparse and fitful sleep, exhausting themselves further, only to suffer once more at the hands of the deadly nocturnal hunter the next night. If this was allowed to continue, their holy war would be lost before they even reached the vampire duchess and what remained of her armies. So, when morning came, the army did not recommence its march, but instead slept through the daylight hours. Their camp was to the east of the ridge of rocky hills running north from Rapallo to the bridge at Pontramola, separating the ancient road from the sea. On the road's other side was a wide stretch of rolling open land all the way to the river Terrano. While almost everyone slept, a handful of dedicants, chosen by lot, guarded, using every trick they could think of to keep themselves awake. What with their penchant for self-flagellation and whipping themselves into a religious frenzy, many employed methods both painful and bloody. When darkness fell, however, and the bruised and battered guards crawled into their tents and huts, the rest of the army awoke and organised for the night ahead. Father Caradalio had ordered a general hunt to be mounted for the slippery fiend, involving every part of the army, bar those few who had served in the daylight watch. Caradalio himself, his admonitor Vincenzo, and his bodyguard of blessed torch-bearing dedicants would stand ready in the camp centre, while the larger bodies of dedicants formed a surrounding ring of companies at a distance of about 100 yards. The lighter troops, including the dedicant crossbowmen, the Abiman horse and mercenary crossbowmen, would circumnavigate the entire camp even further out. All were to keep their eyes peeled for signs of the fiend, and if they spotted him, were to raise a loud alarm by any means to call everyone else to their proximity. Having the general and his elite bodyguard centrally placed ensured they would be among the first to reinforce whichever company had discovered the enemy. This proved more difficult than Father Caradalio had hoped, for the foe was either slippery, cautious, or both. A trail was discovered, along with 2 corpses and 3 dead mules, apparently from fright. The dedicants moved promptly, exactly as planned, but the murderous fiend escaped. Despite the fact that only 2 of Morr's soldiers had perished, which was less than most nights, there was great frustration and disappointment. Still, Caradalio felt in his gut that the fiend could not elude him much longer, and both his own and the dreams of Admonitor Vincenzo the next day confirmed this belief. As it grew dark on the evening of the army's second day of camping, Caradalio knew the enemy would be found that night. He knew not whether the monster could be defeated, for his dreams had been cut short by his awakening just as the fiend came close. Only that it would certainly be discovered. In the second hour after midnight, as he wandered beyond his circle of guards, as if taunting the foe, all the better to lure it, and with the light of both white and green moons basking the camp, Caradalio's prophecy proved true. He spotted the vampire, Lord Adolfo, creeping by a hut only 24 yards away. Adolfo's once living body had been bent and bloated into a horribly bestial form, and a ridge of horny protuberances had burst through the flesh of his back. His skin seemed blue in the moon's light. His eyes, made small by the bony excesses of his face, were wholly bloodshot. His teeth and nails had become fangs and talons. He had long since given up the wearing of clothes, for there were none made that would fit such a frame as his, and he'd given no thought at all to having any made. Such niceties were forgotten, to be replaced by a passionate rage, a vicious hunger, and strongest of all, a loyalty to his mistress, while his sense of self had strayed deep into the realm of carelessness. Caradalio sensed the vampire had not yet noticed him, And so, before raising the all-arm, even before signalling to his bodyguards, he whispered a prayer channeling Morr's will to send harm upon the foe. He could feel his petitionary words made real. For a moment, his own eyes became those of Holy Morr himself, and power flowed through them to lash out. But the vampire merely flinched, as if the curse were nothing more than a nip to gain his attention. He turned to look at the priest, slowly lifting a huge scimitar aloft, as if about to hurl it. "He is here!" cried Carradalio, his voice revealing only angry determination and not a hint of fear. The vampire took no more than 3 leaping strides before his way to Carradalio was blocked by the priest-general's dedicant bodyguards, with many more arriving behind. Each was robed in the grey and red favoured by the Morrite clergy, their flowing garments concealing the scabs and scars of many months of scourging. They wielded either axes or blades, with most carrying a burning torch in their other hand. These were not ordinary torches, the flames not merely fire. Each one had been blessed by holy ritual, making them both mundane and magical, to burn with a heat both real and ethereal. The flickering tongues were otherworldly, as if holes had been torn in the air itself to allow the light and heat of another realm to curl through. Were they to singe Adolfo's flesh, his enchantments would not have healed him, for these torches burnt away the stuff of magic as well as that of the material world. But so swift was his stab and slash that not one flame did touch him, and the dedicants began to fall, lifeless, all around him. Leaping over their corpses came Admonitor Vincenzo, bearing his staff with its amulet of holy water, shouting his own prayers to join with Carradalio's chanting. Yet nothing that Morr had to offer could pierce the evil magic shielding the vampire, and before Vincenzo had even swung his own blade, Adolfo cut him in 2 at the belly, spattering gobbets of blood to fizzle in the flames borne by the few dedicants still on their feet. In barely more than half a dozen blinks, there was only 1 bodyguard remaining, and in half a breath he too was dispatched with ease. Father Carradalio had time to say only Morr's name before the vampire's huge blade pierced through his chest to burst from his back. Adolfo grunted with glee, then hefted the blade upwards, so hurling the lifeless priest-general nearly a dozen yards to smash into a wagon. The vampire froze, his giant blade clutched in both hands and dripping with blood. For the briefest moment, he allowed himself to revel in his slaughterful butchery, to inhale the delicious, sanguine stench surrounding him. Then he caught sight of the mob. Swinging his head quickly about, he discovered that they were all around him, and in some deep recess of what was left of his mind, he knew that his end had come. But it was a mere fragment of consciousness, buried in a mire of brutal cunning, bestial anger, and ravenous hunger, and was quickly forgotten. Even as his blade recommenced its bloody work, the mob closed in on him, relentless. They were driven by a shared frenzy, cultivated through cruel exercises, perfected by hard practice, which, despite being a temporary phenomenon, was in that moment not 1 jot less furious than Adolfo's own. From all sides came spear, axe, flail, and blade. Each and every one was thrust or swung with no care for the wielder's own safety, nor that of their comrades, so that umpteen of their own succumbed to the torrent of blows. And, at the epicentre of the swirling rage, his foul blood gushing from umpteen wounds, Adolfo was hewn to pieces. When the crazed combat finally subsided, the dedicants reeled away. Some sobbed into their hands, others cried out with faces raised to the sky, and yet more stumbled silently in shock, weapons held slack in their hands. Father Carradalio was dead. Brother Vincenzo too. The Disciplinati di Morr was leaderless, the best of them butchered, and with their real work still yet to be done. They had not even crossed the bridge into the vampire duchess's realm, and already they had suffered a potentially fatal wound. Was Morr testing them, or did he already consider them unworthy of his blessing? Either way, their self-scourging soon began, more bloody than ever.